My son sent me a gift box for my birthday. The note was, "Goodbye, beggar." So I made a vow that day to never let his cruel words define me. As I looked at the sleek suit and expensive shoes, I could have let anger consume me, but instead, I chose to rise. I didn't wear the suit to fit in with his world, but to create my own. With nothing but my determination, I opened a small food stall in the corner of a busy street. The beginnings were humble, but every meal I served was crafted with care, and slowly, I gained respect. People saw the heart I put into my work. As the months passed, I turned my modest business into a thriving one, until one day, my son walked past my stall. He didn't recognize me at first, but I knew he would soon see the man I had become. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains of my small apartment, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. I stretched my aching back, feeling every one of my 58 years as I rose from the narrow bed that had been my companion for the past decade. Today was different though. Today was my birthday. My name is Thomas Chin, and I've spent the last 30 years of my life working construction sites, cleaning offices, and doing whatever honest work I could find to provide for my family. My hands, rough and calloused from years of labor, trembled slightly as I made my morning tea. Not from age, but from anticipation. My son, Michael, had promised to visit. Michael. Even thinking his name brought a complicated mix of pride and pain to my chest. 28 years old now, a successful investment banker with a corner office overlooking the city skyline. I remembered when he was just a boy, clinging to my leg as I left for another double shift, promising him that one day things would be better. And they were, for him. The doorbell rang at precisely 9 a.m. Michael was always punctual, a trait he certainly didn't inherit from me. I smoothed down my faded flannel shirt and opened the door, my heart lifting at the sight of him. He stood there in his tailored suit, looking every inch the successful young professional he'd become. But his eyes, those were still the same eyes that used to look up at me with wonder when I'd tell him bedtime stories about dragons and heroes. "Happy birthday, Dad," he said, his voice formal, distant. He didn't step inside, just thrust a large gift box into my hands. The weight of it surprised me, heavy, substantial, wrapped in expensive paper that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Won't you come in?" I asked, trying to keep the hope out of my voice. "I made your favorite egg drop soup, just like when you were little." He glanced at his watch, a gleaming piece of metal that caught the morning light. "I have a meeting at 10. Important clients." He paused, his jaw working as if he were chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. "Just open it later, okay?" Before I could respond, he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. I stood there for a moment, holding the box, feeling its weight in more ways than one. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, quieter, lonelier. I set the box on my kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg I kept meaning to fix. The wrapping paper was beautiful, deep blue with silver ribbons. My hands shook slightly as I carefully removed it, saving the paper out of habit. Inside was a crisp white box, and when I lifted the lid, my breath caught. A suit. Not just any suit, but one that looked like it cost more than I made in 6 months. Charcoal gray, with a subtle pinstripe. Beneath it, a pair of Italian leather shoes that gleamed like mirrors. And on top of it all, a small envelope with my name written in Michael's precise handwriting. I picked up the envelope, my heart beating faster. Maybe this was his way of saying he was proud of me, that he wanted me to have nice things. Maybe he wanted me to wear this when I visited his office, to meet his colleagues. My fingers fumbled with the seal. The note inside was brief, just 4 words that hit me like a physical blow. "Happy birthday. Goodbye, beggar." I read it 3 times, certain I must be misunderstanding. But no, there it was in my son's unmistakable handwriting. "Goodbye, beggar." The words blurred as tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wouldn't cry. Not for this. I sank into the kitchen chair, the one that matched the wobbly table, and stared at the suit. It wasn't a gift, it was a message. He was ashamed of me, of what I represented. the father who still lived in a rundown apartment, who still wore the same clothes he'd worn 10 years ago, who still worked with his hands while his son worked with numbers and deals and important clients. The anger came first, hot and fierce, burning through my chest. How dare he? How dare this boy I'd sacrificed everything for call me a beggar? I'd gone hungry so he could eat. I'd worn shoes with holes so he could have new ones for school. I'd worked myself to the bone so he could have the education that opened all those doors for him. But as quickly as the anger came, it faded, replaced by something else. Something harder and colder and infinitely more powerful. Determination. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the cracked mirror. What I saw was a man who'd let life happen to him for too long. Gray hair that needed cutting, shoulders that stooped from years of bending to pick up after others, eyes that had forgotten how to dream. Michael was right about one thing: this wasn't who I wanted to be anymore. But I wouldn't wear his suit to become someone I wasn't. I wouldn't use his charity to pretend to fit into his world. No, I would create my own. I picked up the note again, smoothing out the creases where I'd crumpled it in my fist. "Goodbye, beggar," I read aloud, and this time, I smiled. Yes, I thought. Goodbye to the old Thomas Chin. Goodbye to the man who accepted whatever life threw at him. Goodbye to the father who waited by the door for scraps of affection from a son who'd outgrown him. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with possibilities, with dreams I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten they existed. By morning, I had a plan. It wasn't much, just a kernel of an idea, but it was mine. I would not let my son's cruel words define me. I would not let them break me. Instead, I would let them forge me into something new, something stronger. The gift he'd meant as an insult would become my catalyst. As dawn broke over the city, I made a vow to myself. One day, Michael would see me again. But when he did, he wouldn't see a beggar. He would see a man who'd risen from the ashes of his contempt, who'd built something from nothing, who'd proved that dignity isn't found in expensive suits or corner offices, but in the courage to begin again. The suit still lay in its box on my table, untouched. Tomorrow, I would sell it. The money would be my seed capital, my first step toward whatever came next. But tonight, I simply sat by my window, watching the city lights flicker like stars, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The pawn shop owner examined the suit with practiced eyes, running his fingers along the fine Italian wool. "Armani," he murmured, checking the label. "This season's collection." "Where'd you get this?" "It was a gift," I said simply, not elaborating. The shoes sat beside the suit on the counter, still in their box, tissue paper pristine. "I can give you $2,000 for the set," he offered, looking up at me with shrewd eyes. "That's generous, considering." Considering what? That I looked like someone who couldn't possibly own such things legitimately? I swallowed my pride and nodded. $2,000. It was more money than I'd had at one time in years. As I left the pawn shop with cash in my pocket, I passed by the financial district where Michael worked. The tall glass buildings reflected the afternoon sun, creating a canyon of light and shadows. Somewhere up there, my son was making deals, impressing clients, building his empire. And somewhere down here, his father was about to build something too. The idea had come to me during my sleepless night: food. It was something I knew, something I was good at. My mother had taught me to cook before she passed, recipes brought over from Taiwan that had been in our family for generations. During the lean years, I'd learned to make magic with the simplest ingredients. Why not turn that skill into something more? I spent the next week researching, walking through different neighborhoods, observing the flow of people, the rhythms of the city. I needed a location, somewhere with heavy foot traffic but affordable enough that my $2,000 could actually make a difference. That's when I found it, a corner spot in Chinatown where an old newsstand was closing down. The owner, Mr. Liu, was retiring, moving to Florida to be with his grandchildren. The spot was perfect, right at the intersection of two busy streets, near both office buildings and residential areas. How much for the spot? I asked Mr. Liu in Mandarin, which seemed to surprise and please him. You want to take over the newsstand? He asked, squinting at me through thick glasses. No, I want to start a food stall. Simple setup. Nothing fancy. He studied me for a long moment. You're not young, he observed bluntly. Starting a business at your age, it's not easy. I'm not looking for easy, I replied. I'm looking for possible. Something in my answer must have resonated with him. We negotiated for an hour over tea in his cluttered booth and finally settled on terms I could afford. The spot would be mine at the end of the month. I threw myself into preparation with an energy I hadn't felt in years. Every dawn found me at the wholesale market, learning prices, building relationships with vendors. I studied food safety regulations at the library, filled out permit applications, designed a simple menu in my head. 5 dishes, that's all. 5 perfect dishes that I could execute flawlessly. My apartment became a test kitchen. I practiced my knife skills until my movements were fluid and economical. I experimented with portions, calculating costs down to the penny. The dumplings had to be perfect, not too thick, not too thin. The sauce for the noodles needed exactly the right balance of sweet and spicy. 3 weeks into my preparations, I was bent over my stove, testing a new batch of char siu when my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Dad? His voice sounded different, uncertain. I've been trying to reach you. You haven't returned my calls. It was true. I'd seen his name appear on my phone several times over the past weeks, but I hadn't been ready to talk. Not yet. I've been busy, I said, stirring the sauce. Busy? He laughed, but it was hollow. Come on, Dad. Look, about the birthday gift. Thank you for the gift, I interrupted. It was very enlightening. Silence stretched between us. I could hear office sounds in the background, keyboards clicking, muffled conversations, the professional world my son inhabited. I'm having a dinner party next week, he said finally. Some colleagues, a few clients. I thought, maybe you'd like to come? You could wear the... I can't make it, I said. But thank you for the invitation. Dad, come on. Don't be like this. I was trying to help you. That suit, it could open doors for you. You could apply for better jobs, maybe something in an office. Michael, I said quietly, I don't need doors opened for me. I'm building my own. What's that supposed to mean? It means goodbye, son. I have sauce burning. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking again, but not from age or anger. This time, it was anticipation. The last week of preparation flew by. I invested in a used but serviceable food cart, had a simple sign made, Chen's Corner. Nothing fancy, just black letters on white background. I bought cooking equipment, containers, a cash box. Every purchase was calculated, every dollar stretched. The night before my opening, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something new. Success wasn't guaranteed, nothing ever was. But for the first time in my life, I was taking a risk on myself. I thought about Michael's note, still tucked into my wallet. Goodbye, Beggar. The words had lost their sting. Now they felt like a challenge, a starting gun fired at the beginning of a race I was finally ready to run. My phone buzzed with a text. Michael again, Dad, please. Let's talk. I turned the phone off. Tomorrow, Thomas Chin would cease to exist as the man who cleaned offices and hauled construction materials. Tomorrow, he would be a business owner, an entrepreneur, a man with his own small corner of the world. The food stall would be modest. The profits, if they came at all, would be small. But it would be mine, built with my own hands, my own sweat, my own dreams. And that, I realized as sleep finally claimed me, was worth more than all the Armani suits in the world. As I drifted off, I could almost smell the char siu, hear the sizzle of dumplings in oil, feel the satisfaction of handing a customer something I'd created. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, I would stop letting life happen to me and start making it happen for me. The old Thomas Chin was gone. In his place stood someone new, someone who had been pushed to the ground and chose to rise, someone who had been labeled a beggar and chose to become a builder instead. Opening day arrived with a spring rain that turned the streets into rivers of umbrellas. I stood under the small awning of my food cart at 5 a.m., watching the water cascade off the edges. Everything was ready, the dumplings pleated and waiting in the steamer, the char siu glazed to perfection, the noodles prepped in portions. But would anyone stop at a new food stall in this weather? My first customer appeared at 6:30, a construction worker seeking shelter from the rain. He ordered the breakfast special, congee with preserved egg and pork. As I ladled the steaming porridge into a container, my hands were steady despite my nerves. "First day?" he asked, noticing the pristine condition of everything. "Yes," I admitted, adding fresh scallions and a drizzle of sesame oil to his order. He took a taste right there, rain drumming on the awning above us. His eyes widened. "This is exactly like my grandmother used to make." He pulled out his phone. "I'm texting my crew. They'll want to know about this." By 7 a.m., I had a line. Construction workers heading to the site, office workers seeking something more substantial than their usual coffee and pastry. Word spread the way it does in the city, through texts, through chance encounters, through the simple power of good food at fair prices. "Uncle, 2 orders of dumplings," called out a young woman in scrubs, probably heading to the hospital nearby. Uncle. The respectful term warmed me more than the steam rising from my cookers. I was someone again, not invisible, not dismissible. I was Uncle Chin who made the best dumplings on the corner. The lunch rush tested every skill I'd practiced. Orders came fast: beef noodles, spring rolls, char siu rice. My movements became a dance, learned through repetition in my tiny apartment kitchen. Ladle, season, garnish, serve. Take money, make change, smile, next order. By 2 p.m., when the lunch crowd finally thinned, I was exhausted but exhilarated. My cash box was fuller than I'd dared hope. More importantly, I'd seen satisfaction on faces, heard compliments, felt the connection that comes from feeding people well. That's when I saw him. Michael stood across the street, partially hidden under a black umbrella. He was with 2 other men in similar expensive suits, probably colleagues. They seemed to be heading to lunch, late as usual for busy executives. Our eyes met across the traffic. I saw the moment recognition hit him. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and then something that looked like horror. He said something to his companions and started across the street toward me, but the light changed and a wave of traffic forced him back. I turned to my next customer, pretending I hadn't seen him. But my hands shook as I packed the order. The afternoon brought unexpected challenges. A health inspector appeared, clipboard in hand, going through every detail of my setup. I held my breath as he checked temperatures, examined my permits, scrutinized my food handling practices. All those hours in the library paid off. I passed without a single violation. "Good setup," he said, making notes. "Clean, organized." Not always the case with new operations. As evening approached, the rain finally stopped, leaving the streets gleaming and fresh. The dinner crowd was different: families, young couples, elderly people from the neighborhood taking their evening walks. I learned names, heard stories, began to understand the rhythm of this corner. Mrs. Wong, who lived in the apartment building next door, sampled my spring rolls and immediately ordered 3 dozen for her mahjong group the next day. A young couple shared an order of noodles, laughing as they tried to manage the long strands with plastic forks. A businessman, phone pressed to his ear, gestured for the usual, and I realized with a start that after just one day, I already had regulars. At 8 p.m., as I was beginning to close down, Michael appeared again. This time he was alone, no umbrella, his perfect hair slightly mussed from the humid evening air. "Dad," he said, approaching slowly as if I might bolt. "What is this?" "This is Chen's corner," I said, continuing to clean my equipment. "Would you like to order something?" "Dad, stop." He looked around, taking in the modest cart, the handwritten menu board, the stack of takeout containers. "Is this because of what I wrote? Your note?" I pulled it from my wallet, now creased from folding and unfolding. "This note was the best gift you ever gave me." His face flushed. "I was trying to help you." "The suit was supposed to." "Supposed to what? Make me into someone I'm not? Help me pretend to fit into your world?" I shook my head. "No, Michael. You called me a beggar. You were right, I was begging. Begging for your approval, your attention, your acceptance. But not anymore. So instead you're, what? Selling street food?" The disdain in his voice was clear. I felt the old hurt rise up but pushed it down. "I'm building something. With my own hands, my own recipes, my own work. Today I served over 100 people. I made them smile. I filled their stomachs with good food at prices they could afford. What did you do today?" "I closed a $3 million deal," he shot back. "And did it make you happy?" He blinked, caught off guard by the question. That's not the point." "Then what is the point, son?" A group of college students approached, chattering in Mandarin and English. "Uncle Chen. Are you still open? Please say yes, we've been thinking about your dumplings all through class." 5 more minutes, I told them with a smile, then turned back to Michael. "I have customers." "This is embarrassing," he muttered, backing away. "My father, selling food on the street like a what?" I challenged. "Like an honest man earning an honest living?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked away, his shoulders rigid with anger or shame, I couldn't tell which. I served the college students, gave them an extra dumpling each because they reminded me of Michael at that age, full of dreams and certainty. They thanked me profusely, took selfies with my food cart, promised to spread the word on social media. As I finally closed up for the night, counting the day's earnings by streetlight, I realized something had shifted. The hurt from Michael's rejection was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I had something else now, purpose, pride, the beginning of something real. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Mr. Chen, I was one of your customers today. I own 3 restaurants in the city. Your char siu is exceptional. Would you consider catering an event next week? Please call me." I stared at the message, then at my tired reflection in the dark window of the shop behind me. The man looking back wasn't the same one who'd opened that birthday gift 4 weeks ago. This man stood straighter, smiled easier, had sauce stains on his apron like badges of honor. Another message, this time from Michael. "Dad, we need to talk. This is insane. You're 58 years old. You should be thinking about retirement, not starting some street food venture. What will people think?" I typed back, "They'll think the dumplings are delicious." Then I turned off my phone, locked up my cart, and began the walk home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, supplies to buy, food to prep, customers to serve. But tonight, I would sleep the deep sleep of a man who had worked hard for himself, not for someone else's approval. The rain had washed the city clean, and the air smelled of possibilities. Somewhere in one of those glass towers, my son was probably pacing his expensive apartment, horrified by his father's choices. But here on the street level, where real life happened, Thomas Chen was becoming someone new, not the man his son wanted him to be, but the man he always had the potential to become. 3 months had passed since I opened Chen's Corner, and the rhythm of my new life had settled into something both exhausting and exhilarating. My days began at 4 a.m. with prep work, followed by the morning rush, the lunch crowd, and the dinner service. By the time I locked up each night, my feet ached and my back protested, but my spirit soared. The restaurant owner who had messaged me that first night became a regular client. His name was James Liu, a second-generation Chinese-American who ran upscale fusion restaurants but craved authentic flavors. My catering jobs for his private events had become a steady source of additional income. "You know," James said one evening, picking up his order of char siu, "you're wasting your talent on this corner." "This corner suits me fine," I replied, though his words sparked something I tried to ignore. "I'm serious, Mr. Chen. I could help you expand. A proper restaurant, investors, the whole deal." I shook my head. "I'm not looking for investors. This is mine." He studied me with knowing eyes. "Pride is good. But don't let it limit you." That night, I found an envelope tucked under my apartment door. Michael's handwriting on the outside, but no note within, just a newspaper clipping. The business section, with an article about his latest promotion. "Youngest senior vice president in firm's history," the headline read. A photo showed him shaking hands with the CEO, that practiced smile I knew so well plastered across his face. I set the clipping aside and returned to my prep work for tomorrow. Let him have his victories. I had my own. The next morning brought unexpected drama. I arrived at my corner to find someone else setting up a food cart in the spot next to mine. A flashy operation with neon signs and a gas-powered grill that looked like it cost more than my entire setup. "Morning, neighbor," the man said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Johnny Tang. Heard this was a good corner for food carts. I recognized the type immediately, a businessman playing at street food, probably saw it as an easy investment. His menu board listed prices that undercut mine by half. "Welcome," I said simply, and went about my setup. The morning rush revealed his strategy. He called out to my regulars, offering free samples, promising faster service, bigger portions. Some were tempted. I watched customers I'd served for months walk past my cart to try the new option. Mrs. Wang stopped at my cart, looking troubled. "Mr. Chen, his dumplings are cheaper." "Then you should try them," I said calmly, though my heart sank. Everyone deserves choice. She ordered from him, and I saw her face after the first bite. Disappointment. The dumplings were clearly mass-produced, reheated rather than fresh. But would that matter if they were half the price? For 3 days, I watched my business drop by 30%. Johnny Tang's aggressive tactics, free samples, loud music, flashy promotional signs, drew the curious and the bargain hunters. I kept my head down and focused on what I could control, the quality of my food. On the 4th day, something interesting happened. The construction crew that had been my first customers returned to my cart. "We tried the other guy yesterday," their foreman said. "No comparison, uncle. Your food has soul." Slowly, my regulars began drifting back. The college students, the hospital workers, the office crowd who valued their lunch break too much to waste it on mediocre food. But the damage was done, my daily earnings had taken a hit I couldn't afford. That evening, as I was cleaning up, James Liu appeared with 2 companions. "Mr. Chen, I want you to meet some friends. This is David Wang, food critic for the City Tribune, and Maria Santos from Channel 7 News." I wiped my hands on my apron, suddenly self-conscious. "How can I help you?" David stepped forward. "Mr. Liu has been raving about your food for months. Mind if I try a few dishes?" For the next hour, I cooked with hands that trembled slightly. This wasn't just another customer, this was someone whose opinion could make or break small food businesses. I prepared each dish with extra care, the way my mother had taught me, the way I'd perfected over months of practice. David ate slowly, thoughtfully, making notes in a small notebook. Maria filmed the process, asking questions about my story, my recipes, my dreams for the business. I answered honestly, simply, without embellishment. "Why street food?" Maria asked. "At your age, most people would choose something easier." Easy isn't always meaningful, I replied, ladling sauce over the char siu. Process, asking questions about my story, my recipes, my dreams for the business. I answered honestly, simply, without embellishment. Why street food? Maria asked. At your age, most people would choose something easier. Easy isn't always meaningful, I replied, ladling sauce over the char siu. I spent decades doing what was expected, what was safe. This, I gestured to my small cart, this is what I choose. Johnny Tang watched from his cart, his usual brash demeanor subdued. His dinner crowd was thin, despite the loud music and flashing lights. As David finished his meal, he looked up at me with a small smile. Mr. Chen, I've eaten at every notable restaurant in this city. This is some of the most honest, soulful cooking I've encountered. May I bring my photographer tomorrow? After they left, I sat on a milk crate behind my cart, overwhelmed. The evening air was cool, carrying the scents of the city, exhaust and flowers, garbage and gourmet coffee, all mixed together in that unique urban perfume. My phone rang. Michael. Dad, I saw you on the news tonight. The teaser for tomorrow's segment. Oh. I tried to sound casual, though my heart raced. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? That competitor, the price war, I could help. I could invest, help you upgrade your equipment, maybe move to a better location. Michael, I interrupted gently. I don't need your money. It's not charity, it's business. I could structure it as a loan, favorable terms. No. Silence stretched between us. I could hear his breathing, frustrated and fast. Why are you so stubborn? He finally exploded. I'm trying to help you. Are you? I asked. Or are you trying to control how your father's story looks? Trying to make it more palatable, more presentable for your colleagues? That's not fair. Isn't it? You sent me that suit to make me look like someone else. Now you want to send money to make my business into something else. When will you accept me as I am? He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was smaller. I just don't want you to fail. Then have faith in me, I said. For once in your life, just have faith in your father. He hung up without saying goodbye. The next morning, David's photographer arrived at dawn, capturing the steam rising from my first batch of dumplings, the careful pleating process, the worn but clean surfaces of my cart. Johnny Tang's cart remained closed. He typically didn't open until the lunch rush, missing the construction crews and early commuters who formed the backbone of my morning business. 20 years I've been shooting food, the photographer said, adjusting his lens. This light, this steam, this story, it's gold. The lunch rush brought a surprise. A group of food bloggers arrived, smartphones at the ready, apparently tipped off about the upcoming article. They ordered one of everything, photographed each dish from multiple angles, live-streamed their reactions. Oh my God, these dumplings, one young woman moaned to her followers. Guys, I'm literally crying. They taste like my grandmother's, but better. Johnny Tang watched it all from his increasingly empty station. Around 2 p.m., he started packing up his equipment. No hard feelings, he said, approaching my cart. You've got something here I can't compete with. It's not a competition, I said, handing him a container of char siu. Food is meant to bring people together. He looked at the container, then at me. You're giving food to the guy who tried to drive you out of business? My mother always said the best revenge is kindness, I replied. Besides, you're not my enemy. You're just someone trying to make a living, same as me. He took the container, tasted the char siu, and shook his head with a rueful smile. Now I really understand why I couldn't compete. He handed me a business card. I manage a food court in the financial district. If you ever want a second location, call me. As his flashy cart disappeared around the corner, I felt something shift. This wasn't about winning or losing, about proving anything to anyone. This was about the simple act of creating something good and sharing it with others. That evening, Maria's segment aired. I watched it on my phone, cringing at how old and tired I looked on camera, but proud of how my food appeared vibrant, appetizing, real. The piece was short but powerful, focusing on the authenticity of the cuisine and the story of reinvention. Within minutes, my phone exploded with messages. Old friends I hadn't heard from in years, former coworkers, distant relatives. And then, a text from Michael. Watched the segment. The food looked amazing. I'm sorry. 3 words. I'm sorry. They sat on my screen like a bridge waiting to be crossed. But I wasn't ready yet. The wound was still too fresh, the journey too new. As I locked up my cart that night, I noticed the line that had formed throughout the day had barely diminished. Tomorrow would be busier, the article would bring more customers, the word would spread further. Success, it seemed, was building its own momentum. But standing there in the dark, surrounded by the familiar smells of oil and spices, I realized something profound. The external validation, the critics' approval, the media attention, even my son's apology, felt hollow compared to the internal satisfaction of knowing I'd stayed true to myself. I thought about Johnny Tang's offer of a second location. A year ago, I would have jumped at such an opportunity, seeing it as validation, as success. Now, I understood that success wasn't about expansion or profit margins. It was about the construction worker who started every morning with my congee, about Mrs. Wong who trusted me enough to come back despite the cheaper option, about the college students who called me uncle and meant it. The city lights reflected in the puddles from an earlier rain, creating a doubled world, one above, one below. I stood between them, no longer the man looking up at towers I couldn't reach, no longer the beggar my son had dismissed. I was simply Thomas Chin, maker of dumplings, keeper of recipes, owner of a small corner where good food and genuine care still mattered. Tomorrow, the article would run. More customers would come. Challenges would arise. Michael would either find his way back to me or he wouldn't. But tonight, I walked home with the satisfaction of knowing I'd found my way back to myself. The article in the City Tribune changed everything. David Wong's review wasn't just a food critique, it was a love letter to authenticity in an increasingly artificial world. The headline read, "The soul of the city lives in a corner food cart," and the accompanying photos made my simple dishes look like art. Within days, the lines at Chen's corner stretched around the block. Food tourists arrived with printed copies of the article, eager to taste the transcendent dumplings and char siu that captures the essence of memory itself. I arrived at 3 a.m. now instead of 4, preparing triple the amount of food, and still sold out by early afternoon. "Uncle Chin, you're famous," laughed Amy, one of my regular college students, as she helped manage the growing line one particularly busy lunch hour. Famous. The word felt foreign in my mouth. I was the same man making the same food, but suddenly everyone wanted a piece of the story. Food bloggers interviewed me between orders. A documentary filmmaker asked to shadow me for a week. Publishers inquired about a cookbook deal. In the midst of this chaos, an unexpected visitor appeared. Catherine Chin, Michael's mother, my ex-wife. I hadn't seen Catherine in 5 years. The divorce had been finalized long ago, but she looked exactly as I remembered, elegant, composed, every hair in place despite the October wind. She stood at the edge of the crowd, Chanel bag clutched tightly, looking as out of place in Chinatown as an orchid in a vegetable garden. "Hello, Thomas," she said when she finally reached the front of the line. "Catherine." I continued prepping orders, unsure why my hands suddenly felt clumsy. "What can I get you?" "I'm not here for food." She glanced around, taking in the crowd, the modest cart, the enthusiasm of the customers. "Michael called me. He's worried about you." "He should worry about himself," I muttered, adding extra scallions to a customer's noodles. "Thomas, please. Can we talk? Privately?" I looked at the line, at least 30 people waiting. But something in her voice, a crack in that perfect composure, made me nod. "Amy, I called to the college student. Can you take orders for 10 minutes? Just write them down, I'll cook when I get back. We walked to the small park across the street, finding a bench beneath a ginkgo tree that was dropping its golden leaves like coins. Michael showed me the article, Catherine began. And the news segment. Thomas, what are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm living my life. She sighed, that familiar sound that used to precede our arguments. You're 58 years old. You have no retirement savings, no health insurance, no stability. And now you're playing entrepreneur with a food cart? Playing? The word stung more than I cared to admit. I work 16-hour days. I serve hundreds of people. I'm building something real. You're building castles in the sand, she countered. What happens when the novelty wears off? When the next trendy food cart opens? When your back gives out from standing all day? I studied her face, seeing the genuine concern beneath the criticism. Once, we'd been partners, dreamers together. Before life and bills and disappointments had worn us down to sharp edges that no longer fit. Do you remember, I said softly, when we first came to this country? You were pregnant with Michael, and we had nothing but hope in each other. We used to dream about opening a restaurant together. Her expression softened. That was a lifetime ago, Thomas. Yes. But the dream never died. It just got buried under decades of doing what we had to do instead of what we wanted to do. Dreams don't pay rent, she said, but there was less conviction in it. Neither does misery, I replied. I spent 30 years being miserable, thinking it was noble, thinking it was sacrifice. But what did it teach our son? That his father was someone to be ashamed of? Someone to fix with expensive suits and cutting words? Catherine flinched. He didn't mean. He meant every word, I interrupted. And he was right. I was a beggar. Not for money, but for approval, for validation, for someone else to tell me I was worthy. Not anymore. We sat in silence, watching the leaves fall. The lunch crowd was probably growing impatient, but for once, I didn't rush. He misses you, Catherine said finally. He won't admit it, but I know my son. He drives by your cart sometimes, parks across the street and watches. He's proud of you, Thomas. He just doesn't know how to say it. Then he needs to learn, I said, standing. I can't teach him that. He has to figure it out himself. I walked back to my cart where Amy had accumulated a stack of orders. The crowd had grown even larger, but they seemed patient, entertained by Amy's stories about her engineering classes and her grandmother's similar dumpling recipe. Catherine followed, standing to the side as I dove back into the rhythm of cooking. She watched for nearly an hour, seeing me in my element, joking with customers, remembering regular orders, adding extra portions for the elderly woman who counted out exact change with trembling fingers. Before leaving, she approached the cart one more time. I was wrong, she said quietly. This isn't playing. This is who you were meant to be. She disappeared into the crowd before I could respond. The afternoon brought new challenges. A health department official arrived, not for a routine inspection, but with a complaint. Someone had reported unsanitary conditions and unpermitted expansions of my operation. I knew immediately who had filed the complaint. Johnny Tang might have conceded defeat gracefully in person, but clearly he'd decided on a different strategy. The inspector went through everything with unusual thoroughness, looking for any violation that could shut me down. Your permit is for a single cart, he said, noting the small folding table I'd added to hold condiments. This constitutes an expansion. It's a table, I protested. For customer convenience. It's a violation. Remove it immediately or face fines. I complied, biting back anger. He found 3 more minor issues: a cutting board with scratches too deep, a thermometer reading 2 degrees off, a hand-washing station that needed more soap. Each fixable, but together they painted a picture of operation skating on the edge of compliance. "You have 48 hours to address these issues," he said, handing me the citation. "I'll be back to re-inspect. If everything isn't perfect." He let the threat hang. After he left, I slumped against my cart. The day's earlier triumph felt distant. This was the reality of trying to build something. There would always be someone trying to tear it down. My phone buzzed. Michael again, heard about the health department visit. "This is what I was trying to warn you about. It's not too late to accept my help." I stared at the message. How did he know about the inspection so quickly? Unless... I thought about Catherine's words, about him parking across the street, watching. Had he been here today? Seen my humiliation? Instead of responding, I got back to work. The dinner crowd was beginning to form, and I had food to serve, violations or no violations. That night, I stayed late addressing the inspector's concerns. New cutting board, calibrated thermometer, industrial-sized soap dispenser. Each item ate into my carefully hoarded profits. The folding table sat in my apartment, a symbol of how easily progress could be reversed. At midnight, I was still working when a familiar figure appeared. Michael, still in his suit despite the late hour, holding 2 cups of coffee from the 24-hour diner down the street. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering me a cup. I accepted it wordlessly. We stood there, father and son, separated by 3 feet of sidewalk and years of misunderstanding. "I know what you're thinking," he said eventually. "That I'm here to gloat, to say I told you so." "Are you?" He shook his head. "I'm here because I finally understand something. That review, the way David Wong described your food, he wasn't just talking about dumplings. He was talking about integrity. About refusing to compromise. It's just food, Michael." "No," he said firmly. "It's not. I've spent 5 years in that tower, making deals, moving money, impressing people who don't even remember my name the next day. You've spent 3 months on this corner and already made more real impact than I have in my entire career." I sipped the coffee, letting his words settle. Impact doesn't pay for health code violations. "Let me help," he said quickly. "Not as an investor, not to control anything. Just as a son who wants to support his father." "No. Dad. No, Michael. Don't you see? The moment I take your money, it stops being mine. It becomes something else, a family business, a shared venture, a compromise. I need to do this alone." His face fell. "So what, I'm supposed to just watch you struggle? Watch people like Johnny Tang try to destroy what you've built?" "You're supposed to have faith," I said, echoing my words from days earlier. "That's all I've ever wanted from you, not your money, not your connections, just your faith that your father isn't a fool." He set down his coffee cup, ran his hands through his perfect hair. "The suit," he said suddenly. "The note. I need to explain." "No," I interrupted. "You don't. That note set me free, Michael. It showed me who I'd become in your eyes, and more importantly, who I'd become in my own." "I should thank you." "I was cruel," he insisted. "I was ashamed, and I took it out on you." "That wasn't right." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't. But it was true. I was a beggar for your love, your respect, your acknowledgement. The suit was your way of trying to change me into someone you could be proud of. But I had to change myself into someone I could be proud of." We stood in silence as a late-night bus rumbled past, its windows glowing in the darkness. The city never slept, but it felt like we were the only 2 people awake in the world. "I am proud of you," Michael said finally, so quietly I almost missed it. "I've been proud since the first day, when you chose to build instead of break. I didn't know how to show it without feeling like I was betraying everything I'd worked for. And what have you worked for? I asked gently. He laughed, but it was hollow. I don't even know anymore. Success? Money? The approval of people who matter less to me than the stranger who serves me coffee? It's not too late, I said, unconsciously echoing his earlier words. You're young. You can still choose differently. Can I? He looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than his 28 years. Can we? Can we choose to be different than what we've become? I thought about the 3 months since his birthday gift, about the man I'd been and the man I was becoming. Yes, I said simply. We can. But we have to choose it every day, with every small decision, every small act. It's not grand gestures that change us, it's the daily choice to be better than we were yesterday. Michael picked up his coffee cup, raised it in a small toast. To daily choices, then. We drank in companionable silence, the first we'd shared in years. The health code violations still waited to be fixed, the challenges would still be there tomorrow, but something fundamental had shifted between us. I should go, Michael said eventually. Early meeting tomorrow. Another $3 million deal to close. And I should finish these repairs, I replied. Dumplings to make, customers to serve. He started to leave, then turned back. Dad? That offer to help, it stands. Not as an investor, not as someone trying to control your dream. Just as a son who believes in his father. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty street. I worked until dawn, fixing everything the inspector had noted and more. As the sun rose over Chinatown, painting the buildings in shades of gold and possibility, I stood back and surveyed my small kingdom. It wasn't much, a cart, some equipment, recipes passed down through generations. But it was mine, built with my own hands, my own sweat, my own determination. The morning prep awaited. In a few hours, the lines would form again. The inspector would return. New challenges would arise. But I was ready for them all. The beggar was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that dignity isn't granted by others but claimed by oneself, one dumpling at a time. The inspector returned exactly 48 hours later, as promised. I stood beside my cart at 7 a.m., every violation addressed, every surface gleaming, every document in perfect order. He went through his checklist with meticulous care, trying to find fault where none existed. The cutting board, he said finally, running his finger along its surface. New? As requested, I replied, showing him the receipt. He grunted, made a note, continued his inspection. The morning crowd was already forming, but I couldn't serve anyone until he cleared me. I saw my regulars, the construction crew, Mrs. Wong, the hospital workers, waiting patiently, showing their support through their presence. After an hour that felt like a lifetime, he signed off on the inspection. You're in compliance, he said, almost reluctantly. But I'll be watching. As he walked away, the crowd burst into spontaneous applause. Someone had been filming, and I later learned the video went viral, community rallies behind beloved food cart owner. But in that moment, all I felt was relief and exhaustion. The weeks that followed brought a kind of success I hadn't anticipated. The combination of David Wong's review, the news coverage, and now the viral video had transformed Chen's Corner from a neighborhood spot into a destination. Food tourists arrived daily. A famous chef stopped by and posted about it on social media. There was talk of including me in a Best Street Food in America documentary. But success, I was learning, came with its own challenges. Mr. Chen, Amy said one afternoon, helping me manage the ever-growing lines, you need help. Real help, not just me between classes. She was right. I was burning out, working 18-hour days, barely sleeping. My hands, which had once moved with fluid grace, now shook from exhaustion. My back screamed protests I could no longer ignore. But hiring help meant trusting someone else with my recipes, my standards, my reputation. I'll think about it, I told her, though we both knew I was too stubborn to change. That night, I made a costly mistake. Exhausted beyond measure, I mixed up orders, giving a customer with severe shellfish allergies dumplings made with shrimp paste. The reaction was immediate and terrifying, the young woman's throat closing, her boyfriend frantically calling 911 while she gasped for air. The paramedics arrived quickly, administered epinephrine, saved her life. But the damage to my spirit was profound. I'd nearly killed someone through carelessness, through the pride that insisted I could do everything alone. I'm so sorry, I repeated to the boyfriend as they loaded her into the ambulance. I'm so sorry. She'll be okay, he said, but his eyes were hard. But this shouldn't have happened. You're too busy, too overwhelmed. Someone's going to get seriously hurt. After they left, I closed the cart early, something I'd never done before. I sat on my milk crate in the alley behind my spot, head in my hands, wondering if I'd let success poison what had started as pure. My phone rang. Michael. Dad, I heard what happened. Are you okay? News traveled fast in the digital age. No, I admitted. I'm not okay. I'm coming over. Don't. But he'd already hung up. 20 minutes later, he appeared in the alley, still in his work clothes but with his tie loosened, looking more human than I'd seen him in years. Tell me, he said simply, sitting on an overturned bucket beside me. I told him everything, the exhaustion, the mistake, the horror of watching that young woman struggle to breathe because of my negligence. You need help, he said when I finished. I know. No, Dad, you need to really hear this. You've proved whatever you needed to prove. You've built something amazing. But you're going to destroy it, and yourself, if you don't learn to accept help. It's not about proving anything anymore, I said. It's about. I don't know how to trust anyone else with this. These recipes, they're all I have left of my mother, of where we came from. How do I hand that over to a stranger? Michael was quiet for a moment. Then, what if it wasn't a stranger? I looked at him, confused. I've been thinking, he continued slowly, about what you said. About daily choices. About choosing to be different. He took a deep breath. I want to help. Not with money, not as an investor. I want to work the cart. Michael, you have a career. A career that's killing me slowly, he interrupted. Dad, I make more money than I can spend, and I've never been more miserable. I watch you here, exhausted but alive, and I realize I haven't felt alive in years. You don't know the first thing about cooking. Then teach me. His eyes were bright with something I hadn't seen since he was a child, enthusiasm, genuine and unforced. Let me earn this, the way you did. Start me at the bottom. Let me prep vegetables, wash dishes, learn the recipes the way grandmother taught you. I stared at my son, this stranger in an expensive suit asking to trade his corner office for a corner food cart. Your mother will have a heart attack. Mom already knows. I talked to her last week. She thinks I'm crazy, but she also said something interesting. She said I'm finally starting to look like your son. And what about your job? You can't just walk away from being senior vice president. Watch me, he said with a smile that was pure mischief. Actually, I already submitted my 2 weeks' notice. Figured if you said no, I'd find another food cart to learn from. But I'd rather learn from the best. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the near tragedy, the weight of the day, I felt myself smiling. You know the hours are brutal. I know. The pay is nothing compared to what you make now. I know. And I'm a tough teacher. My mother was harder on me than any boss you've ever had, and I'll be the same with you. I'm counting on it. We sat in silence as the city hummed around us. Somewhere, that young woman was recovering in a hospital bed because of my mistake. Somewhere, health inspectors were probably preparing their next visit. Somewhere, competitors were plotting to take advantage of any weakness. But here in this alley, something new was beginning. "Okay," I said finally. 2 weeks trial. You start at 4 a.m. tomorrow. Bring clothes you don't mind ruining. Michael's grin was like sunrise. "Yes, chef." "Don't call me chef. I'm not a chef, I'm just." "You're my father," he said simply. And it's about time I learned what that really means. The next 2 weeks were a revelation. Michael arrived every morning at 3:45, 15 minutes early, wearing jeans and t-shirts I didn't know he owned. He started where I had, washing vegetables, learning to fold dumplings, understanding the rhythm of service. He was terrible at first. His dumplings fell apart. He burned 3 batches of char siu. He moved too slowly during rush periods, causing backups that tested customer patience. But he persevered with a determination I recognized. It was the same drive that had taken him to the top of the corporate world, now redirected toward mastering the perfect pleat in a dumpling skin. The next 6 weeks became a masterclass in controlled chaos. We spent mornings at the cart, maintaining our regular service, then afternoons at the rented kitchen, testing recipes that could be scaled up. Saracen proved invaluable, creating systems for tracking dietary needs that made our original allergy protocol look primitive. 17 vegetarians, 5 vegans, 12 gluten-free, 8 nut allergies, 3 shellfish, she rattled off during one planning session. And 1 guest who's allergic to nightshades. "What are nightshades?" Michael asked. "Tomatoes, peppers, eggplant," I replied, already adjusting recipes in my head. "We'll create stations, separate prep areas for each restriction." Catherine surprised us by offering to help. "I may not cook," she said, appearing at the commercial kitchen one afternoon, "but I can organize. Let me handle the logistics, scheduling, supply ordering, transportation." Watching my ex-wife efficiently coordinate with vendors while our son perfected his knife skills and I tested sauce ratios, I felt a strange sense of completion. We'd been a broken family for so long, but here in this kitchen, united by a common purpose, we were healing. Amy recruited a team of college students to serve at the event. "They need the money, you need the help, everyone wins," she said pragmatically. We trained them over several evenings, teaching them not just to serve food but to tell its story. "This isn't fast food," I instructed them. "Each dish has history, meaning. The dumplings use my grandmother's recipe from Taiwan. The char siu is based on a technique that's 300 years old. When you serve, you're sharing culture, not just cuisine." 3 days before the wedding, disaster struck. Our main supplier, the one we'd relied on for months, had a warehouse fire. No inventory, no alternatives, no way to source ingredients for 500 guests with traditional channels. "We're ruined," Michael said, staring at the email notification. "No," I said, thinking quickly. "We pivot. Remember the wholesale market where I learned the business? They open at 3 a.m. We'll go direct, buy what we need, pay cash. But the quality will be better," I assured him. "Fresher. We just have to work harder for it." At 2:30 a.m. on the day before the wedding, our whole team, Michael, Catherine, Amy, even Saracen, met at the wholesale market. It was like entering another world, a nocturnal ecosystem of buyers and sellers, of shouted negotiations and careful selections. "How do you know which vendors to trust?" Catherine asked, watching me examine produce with practiced eyes. "You learn," I said, showing her how to check for freshness, how to spot quality. "But mostly, you build relationships. Mr. Zhang here, I buy from his family for 6 months now. He saves the best for loyal customers." We filled 3 vans with ingredients, spending hours selecting each item. Michael negotiated prices with growing confidence, his Mandarin improving by necessity. Amy charmed vendors into throwing in extra herbs. Sarah meticulously checked everything against her allergen lists. The cooking began immediately. 16 hours of prep, all hands working. Catherine, who claimed she couldn't cook, found herself rolling spring rolls with surprising skill. "It's like wrapping presents," she said, pleased with herself. Michael and I worked in synchronized rhythm, no longer teacher and student but partners. He developed his own style, more precise than mine, influenced by his years of attention to detail in banking. Where I cooked by instinct, he cooked by intention, and somehow the combination elevated both our efforts. "Dad," he said during a brief break, both of us sitting on crates in the alley behind the kitchen, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret the path that brought us here? All those years of struggle, the divorce, the distance between us?" I thought carefully. Regret is the wrong word. Every choice, every hardship, every mistake, they all led to this moment. Would I change things if I could? Maybe. But then we might not be here, doing this, together. "I'm glad we're here," he said simply. "So am I, son." "So am I." The wedding day dawned bright and clear. We arrived at the venue, a beautiful garden estate, at dawn, setting up stations with military precision. Sarah's planning paid off as each dietary restriction area was clearly marked, color-coded, foolproof. James Lou found us during setup. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," I admitted. 100 people at the cart is one thing. 500 at a formal event. "You'll be magnificent," he said confidently. "I've eaten at the best restaurants in the world. What you create has something they don't, authenticity. Don't lose that trying to be fancy." The guests began arriving at sunset. We watched from the kitchen as elegant people in formal wear mingled in the gardens. Somewhere among them was the bride, James's daughter, trusting us with one of the most important days of her life. "Places, everyone," I called out. "Remember, we're not just serving food. We're sharing our story, our culture, our heart. Make every plate count." The service began. Our college servers, transformed in their crisp uniforms, moved through the crowd with grace. The first wave of appetizers went out, spring rolls, dumplings, delicate bites that prompted immediate murmurs of approval. Then the main courses. We created stations where guests could watch final preparations, Michael manning the wok, Flames dancing as he tossed noodles, me carving char siu with theatrical precision, Catherine, of all people, explaining dishes to curious guests with newfound authority. "This is extraordinary," one guest told me, a woman dripping in diamonds. "Where did you train?" "On a street corner in Chinatown," I replied honestly. "And in my mother's kitchen before that." Instead of the disdain I might have expected, her eyes lit up. "How wonderful! Real food, real stories. So rare these days." Halfway through service, Sarah Chen appeared in the kitchen. "No issues," she reported with satisfaction. "Every dietary need met, every guest happy." "You've done it." The bride herself visited the kitchen near the end of service, still glowing in her wedding dress. "Mr. Chen, Michael," she said, tears in her eyes, "my grandmother was from Taiwan. Your dumplings, they taste like her kitchen, like my childhood. Thank you for bringing her memory to my wedding." After she left, Michael and I stood quietly for a moment, overwhelmed by the unexpected emotion of her words. "This is why we do it," he said finally. "Not for reviews or profit margins. For moments like that." The event ended with a dessert station featuring traditional sweets alongside modern interpretations. Watching guests of all backgrounds enjoying our food, sharing stories prompted by familiar flavors, I understood something profound. We weren't just in the food business, we were in the memory business, the connection business, the business of bringing people together across cultures and generations. As we packed up, exhausted but exhilarated, James Lou pulled me aside. "There will be other events," he said. "Word spreads. Are you ready for what comes next?" I looked at my team, my son, my ex-wife, my chosen family of helpers and friends. 6 months ago, I'd been a solitary man with a food cart and a wounded heart. Now I was part of something larger, something healing. "We're ready," I said with confidence I'd earned through every early morning, every burned batch, every satisfied customer. "Whatever comes next, we're ready." The drive back to Chinatown was quiet, everyone lost in their own thoughts. As we unloaded equipment, Michael said, "Tomorrow's Sunday. Carts closed. Everyone sleep in." "What about Monday?" Amy asked. "Monday we're back at the corner," I said. 500 guests or 5, the work continues. "But different now," Catherine added. "Bigger." "Not bigger," I corrected gently. "Just more complete." That night, I walked past our corner spot on my way home. The cart sat locked and quiet, but I could almost hear the echo of future mornings, the sizzle of oil, the steam from dumplings, the chatter of regular customers mixed with new faces drawn by our growing reputation. 6 months ago, a cruel note had shattered my sense of self. Now, that same note sat in my wallet like a talisman, reminding me that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as wounds. The path to healing, I'd learned, wasn't straight or simple. It wound through mistakes and triumphs, through family kitchens and commercial venues, through forgiveness sought and forgiveness granted. The success of James Liu's daughter's wedding opened floodgates we hadn't anticipated. Within weeks, Chen's Corner had bookings for corporate events, birthday celebrations, and cultural festivals. We maintained our daily cart service, but evenings and weekends were increasingly devoted to catering. Michael created a simple website, and inquiries poured in faster than we could handle. "We need to make a decision," Michael said one evening, showing me a spreadsheet on his laptop. "We're turning down more events than we're accepting. Either we expand properly or we set limits." I studied the numbers. In 6 months, we'd gone from a single cart to a small but thriving business. The bank account that had once held my meager savings now contained enough to consider real expansion, a permanent location, more staff, equipment upgrades. "What do you think?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "I think we're at a crossroads," he said carefully. "We can stay small, keep the soul of what we've built. Or we can grow, take risks, maybe lose something in the process." Before I could respond, my phone rang. An unknown number, but something made me answer. "Mr. Chen? This is Robert Harrison from Harrison Development Group. I'd like to discuss a business proposition with you." Harrison Development. They owned half the commercial real estate in the city, including the building where Michael used to work. "What kind of proposition?" "I'd prefer to discuss it in person." "Would tomorrow morning work?" "My office?" I agreed, curiosity overcoming caution. After hanging up, I told Michael about the call. His face went pale. "Harrison Development? Dad, they're major players. What could they want with us?" Only one way to find out. The next morning, I put on my best shirt, not the Armani suit, which I'd never retrieved from the pawn shop, but clean and pressed clothing that represented who I actually was. Michael insisted on coming along. Harrison's office occupied the top floor of a glass tower that scraped the sky. Everything was marble and steel, cold and impressive. We were shown to a conference room with views that stretched to the horizon. Robert Harrison entered with an entourage, lawyers, assistants, people whose roles I couldn't guess. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of aggressive energy that built empires. "Mr. Chen, thank you for coming." He didn't shake hands, just gestured for us to sit. "I'll be direct. I've been following your story. Street vendor to successful caterer. It's impressive." "Thank you," I said cautiously. "I'm developing a new concept. Food halls, but elevated. Authentic cuisine from real practitioners, not celebrity chefs playing at authenticity. I want Chen's Corner as an anchor tenant." Michael shifted beside me. I kept my expression neutral. "Tell me more." Harrison launched into a presentation, architectural renders, financial projections, marketing strategies. The food hall would be in the new development downtown, targeting young professionals who craved authentic experiences. Chen's Corner would have a prime spot, full kitchen, seating area. The investment required was minimal compared to the potential returns. Why us? I asked when he finished. There are hundreds of food vendors in the city. Because you have what money can't buy, a story, authenticity, a following. People don't just buy your dumplings, they buy into your narrative. The immigrant who made good, the father-son reconciliation, the community you've built. That's marketing gold. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. He talked about our story like it was a commodity, something to be packaged and sold. What would you need from us? Michael asked, ever practical. Exclusivity, Harrison said immediately. No more street cart, no independent catering. Everything under our roof, our brand. We'd handle marketing, operations, expansion. You'd just cook. Just cook, I repeated. And give up everything else. You'd be giving up struggle for success, he countered. No more 4 a.m. starts, no more weather concerns, no more health department harassment. Isn't that what every immigrant dreams of? To make it big? I thought of my mother, teaching me to fold dumplings in our tiny apartment. Of the construction workers who'd been my first customers. Of Mrs. Wong, counting out exact change with shaking hands. Can we have time to consider? Michael asked diplomatically. Of course. But not too long. Construction starts in 3 months, with or without you. We left the tower in silence, descended from the clouds back to street level where real life happened. Only when we were blocks away did Michael speak. It's everything we could have dreamed of, he said slowly. Financial security, expansion opportunity, legitimacy. Is it? I asked. Is that what we dreamed of? We walked back to Chinatown, past our corner where Amy was handling the lunch rush with our part-time helpers. Customers chatted in multiple languages, steam rose from the dumplings, life flowed in its organic rhythm. Uncle Chin called out Marcus, one of the construction workers. You're late. Who's going to tell me if my wife's cooking is better than yours? Her cooking is always better, I called back, earning laughs from the crew. This was what Harrison didn't understand. We weren't selling food, we were part of a community. The corner wasn't just a location, it was a gathering place, a constant in people's daily lives. That evening, we held a family meeting. Catherine, Amy, Sarah Chin, our core team gathered in my apartment around the same wobbly table where I'd first opened Michael's gift. It's an incredible offer, Catherine said after we explained. The smart business move would be to accept. Since when do we make the smart move? Michael asked wryly. But we need to consider it seriously, Sarah added. The security it would provide, the growth potential. At what cost? Amy interrupted. You'd lose everything that makes Chen's Corner special. You'd become just another vendor in a food court, no matter how upscale. We debated for hours, listing pros and cons, running numbers, imagining futures. But in my heart, I already knew the answer. The next morning, I was at the cart at 4 a.m. as usual, Michael beside me. We worked in comfortable silence, preparing for the day ahead. As the sun rose over Chinatown, painting familiar buildings in golden light, I made my decision final. We're saying no, I told Michael. He nodded, no surprise on his face. I know. I knew the moment Harrison called our story marketing gold. Are you disappointed? Relieved, he admitted. I left one glass tower already. I don't want to be trapped in another, even if we're the ones being served this time. I called Harrison that afternoon, declining his offer politely but firmly. His response was less polite. You're making a mistake, Chin. Small operations like yours can't survive long term. When you fail, and you will, don't expect the offer to still be available. I understand, I said calmly. Thank you for the opportunity. Within days, we felt the consequences. Health department visits increased again. A new food cart appeared across the street, suspiciously well-funded, offering similar dishes at lower prices. Online reviews attacking our unsanitary conditions multiplied overnight. Harrison's playing hardball, Michael observed, reading the latest fake review. Let him, I said, continuing to prep vegetables. We've survived worse. But the pressure intensified. Our commercial kitchen rental was suddenly terminated, the owner claimed renovations, but we knew better. 2 of our biggest catering clients canceled, citing vague concerns about reliability. One evening, as we dealt with yet another suspicious health inspection, Michael lost his temper. This is insane. We should file complaints, get lawyers involved, fight back. No, I said firmly. We cook. We serve. We endure. That's how we win. By letting them destroy us? By refusing to be destroyed. The next weeks tested that resolve. Revenue dropped as the orchestrated campaign against us continued. We had to let go of 1 part-time helper, tighten every expense. The new competitor across the street, clearly funded by Harrison, used every trick to steal customers. Then, unexpectedly, the community fought back. It started with Mrs. Wong, shuffling past the new cart every morning to wait in our longer line. Then the construction crew, loudly proclaiming our superiority to anyone who'd listen. The college students created a social media campaign, #SaveChen's that went viral locally. Real food, real people, real community, Amy's posts read, accompanied by photos of our regular customers, their stories, their connections to our corner. David Wong, the food critic who'd started our rise, wrote a scathing editorial about corporate development destroying authentic food culture. There's something else, he said when we separated, wiping his eyes. Lynn and I want to name the baby Chin. First name Chin. So they'll always carry the corner with them, wherever life takes them. Chin Chin? I laughed through my own tears. Chin Michael if it's a boy, Chin Lynn if it's a girl. A reminder that identity isn't something to be ashamed of but something to celebrate. As we descended back to the party, my phone buzzed with a message. Mrs. Wong, watching Amy's livestream from San Francisco, happy birthday, Thomas. Give my love to everyone. The dumplings here are good, but they taste better with family. Thank you for showing us all what that really means. The party continued past midnight. At one point, I found myself teaching a group of college students the proper way to pleat dumplings, my mother's voice echoing in my memory as I repeated her instructions. These young people, diverse in background but united in enthusiasm, would carry these skills forward, adapting and evolving them while honoring their essence. Professor Chen, one called out teasingly, will you teach at the cooking school? Every chance I get, I promised. As the celebration finally wound down, as friends helped clean and pack up, as the corner returned to its quiet nighttime state, I stood with my family, blood and chosen, in front of the cooking school that would open next week. Are you happy? Lynn asked, her hand resting on her belly where my grandchild grew. I thought about the question seriously. 5 years ago, happiness had seemed as distant as those tower lights, something for other people, successful people, people who hadn't been called beggars by their own children. Now, surrounded by evidence of what love and persistence could build, with my son beside me as partner and friend, with a grandchild on the way who would grow up understanding that heritage was both burden and gift, with a community that had become family and a corner that had become home, now I understood that happiness wasn't a destination but a daily choice, made in small moments and grand gestures alike. Yes, I said simply. Completely. Michael produced one last surprise, a new sign for the cart, replacing the simple Chen's Corner with something more elaborate, Chen's Corner, serving community since 2019. Thomas and Michael Chen, proprietors. Partners, he said, hanging it carefully. Official and equal. As we finally locked up, ready to rest before another 4 a.m. start, I pulled out the note one last time. Goodbye, Beggar had started this journey, but it no longer defined it. I folded it carefully and placed it in the cooking school, in a frame Amy had prepared, part of our story but not our ending. Same time tomorrow? Michael asked, our ritual question. Same time tomorrow, I confirmed. And all the tomorrows after. But as we started to leave, Lynn suddenly gasped, gripping Michael's arm. I think it's time. The baby? Now? We scrambled into action, all our careful planning forgotten in the beautiful chaos of life arriving on its own schedule. As we rushed to the hospital, I couldn't help but laugh at the timing. Of course my grandchild would choose this moment, the end of one story and the beginning of another. 8 hours later, as dawn broke over the city, Chinlin entered the world, healthy, loud, and perfect. I held her for the first time as morning light streamed through the hospital window, the same light that had illuminated so many morning prep sessions, so many new beginnings. Hello, little one, I whispered. Welcome to our corner of the world. Michael, exhausted but radiant, put his arm around me. She'll grow up in the kitchen, learning recipes, hearing stories. Learning that love is the most important ingredient, Lynn added weakly but warmly from the bed. And that sometimes, I said, thinking of our whole improbable journey, the best gifts come disguised as challenges. Later, Catherine arrived with food from the cart Amy had opened for us, the community continuing even in our absence. We ate dumplings in the hospital room, for generations sharing a meal, and I knew that this was wealth beyond measure. The story that began with rejection had become one of redemption. The man who'd been called a beggar had become rich in all the ways that mattered. The corner that started as escape had become foundation for a legacy that would outlive us all. As I looked at my granddaughter, already grasping at the air with tiny, determined fingers, I saw the future, not just of our family but of our traditions, our values, our understanding that true success is measured not in what we achieve for ourselves but in what we create for others. Thank you, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was addressing Michael, fate, or perhaps that long-ago version of myself who'd chosen to rise instead of fall. For what? Michael asked. For the gift, I said. All of it. Every part. He understood, smiling through exhausted tears. We sat in comfortable silence, 3 generations, for, if you counted Chinlin already beginning to shape her world with hungry cries, bound together by more than blood, by choice, by work, by the daily decision to show up for each other. Outside the window, the city was waking up. Somewhere in Chinatown, our corner was alive with steam and conversation. The cooking school would open next week. New challenges would come. But for now, in this perfect moment, we were complete, a family forged in fire and seasoned with love, proof that endings can become beginnings and that the hardest roads often lead to the most beautiful destinations. The beggar was gone forever, replaced by a patriarch, a teacher, a bridge between worlds. And as Chinlin wrapped her impossibly small fingers around mine, I knew our story would continue, one dumpling, one connection, one act of love at a time.